The message arrived at Earth's Central Command on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Taehyun Park read it 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. The Velkari Dominion, rulers of 12,000 star systems, had sent an ultimatum. They wanted 12 human colonies. They wanted payment in precious metals. They wanted Earth to bow down and accept their authority. They gave humanity 30 days to respond. Taehyun sat back in his chair and laughed. Not because it was funny. He laughed because the Velkari had no idea what they had just done. They had poked the bear. They had insulted humanity. And worst of all, they had given Earth a deadline. The Velkari Dominion had existed for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across the galaxy like a massive web. Every species they encountered either joined them or died. They had the biggest fleet. They had the strongest weapons. They had never lost a war. To them, humanity looked weak. Earth's colonies were scattered and independent. Human corporations competed against each other. There was no emperor, no single ruler, no unified voice. The Velkari saw chaos. They thought chaos meant weakness. They were wrong. Taehyun called an emergency meeting of the United Earth Council. Representatives came from every major colony and corporate territory. They gathered in a secure facility beneath Geneva. The room was tense. Everyone had read the message. Everyone knew what it meant. Ambassador Mirai Choi spoke first. She was calm as always. Her voice never rose above a conversational tone, but everyone listened when she talked. She had negotiated peace between Mars and the Belt colonies. She had stopped 3 corporate wars. If anyone could find a way out of this mess, it was her. We have 2 choices, Mirai said. We can fight them directly, which we will lose. Or we can fight them differently, which we might win. A representative from the Jupiter colonies stood up. His face was red with anger. You want us to surrender? Give them our colonies? Pay them tribute? We are humans. We do not bow to anyone. Mirai smiled. It was not a warm smile. I never said anything about surrendering. I said we should fight them differently. Taehyun stood and activated a holographic display. It showed the Velkari Dominion's territory. Thousands of systems connected by trade routes and military supply lines. It looked overwhelming. It looked unbeatable. Look closer, Taehyun said. He zoomed in on the network of connections. Everything they have is connected. Every system links to their central control. They have one language, one currency, one military command structure. They think this makes them strong. He paused and looked around the room. But it also makes them vulnerable. If we can access their systems, we can control everything. If we can turn their subjects against them, their empire falls apart. They have never fought an enemy like us before. They do not know how to fight chaos. Dr. Hyejin Lee raised her hand. She was young, barely 30, but she was the best technology expert Earth had. She understood alien systems better than most aliens understood them themselves. I have been studying Velkari technology for 2 years, she said quietly. Their encryption is strong, but it follows predictable patterns. Their central control system is their greatest weakness. If we can infiltrate it, we can do anything we want. The room erupted in discussion. Some people were excited. Others were skeptical. A few thought the whole plan was insane. Commander Suna Yoon, head of Earth's intelligence service, stood up. She was tall and thin, with cold eyes that missed nothing. This will not be a traditional war, she said. We will not march armies across planets. We will not have glorious battles. We will lie, cheat, sabotage, and manipulate. We will make them destroy themselves from the inside. Can everyone in this room accept that? Silence filled the chamber. Then one by one, hands went up. The vote was unanimous. Earth would accept the Velkari ultimatum. Publicly, humanity would look weak and defeated. Privately, humanity would prepare for the most unusual war in galactic history. 3 days later, Earth sent its response. Mirai Choi personally delivered it to the Velkari ambassador. The message was humble and apologetic. Earth would surrender the 12 colonies. Earth would pay the tribute. Earth would recognize Velkari authority over human space. The Velkari were pleased. They celebrated their easy victory. High Chancellor Velkros gave a speech about human weakness and Velkari superiority. The message was broadcast across their empire. They wanted everyone to see how easily humanity had been defeated. But while the Velkari celebrated, Earth was moving. Captain Ji-hoon Kang took his special operations team deep into Velkari territory. They traveled on civilian ships disguised as traders and merchants. They spoke Velkari languages perfectly. They knew Velkari customs. They blended in. Ji-hoon was good at his job. He had worked undercover on a dozen worlds. He could change his appearance, his accent, even the way he walked. To the Velkari, he looked like just another merchant trying to make money in their empire. His team split up and went to different systems. They made contact with maintenance workers, dock officials, and low-level administrators. They offered bribes. They made friends. They learned how Velkari systems worked, and slowly, carefully, they began planting seeds of chaos. Meanwhile, Dr. Heejin Lee worked around the clock in her laboratory. She had samples of Velkari technology that Earth had captured over the years. She took them apart piece by piece. She learned how they worked. She found weaknesses, and she built tools that would let humans access Velkari networks without being detected. Commander Suna Yoon started her own campaign. She created fake news stories about Velkari corruption. She spread rumors about government waste. She highlighted every mistake and failure in the Velkari system. Her propaganda was subtle. It did not attack the Dominion directly. It just asked questions. It made people think. On the border worlds, people began to doubt. The Velkari had ruled them for generations, but they had never ruled them fairly. The lower castes worked hard and received little. The upper castes lived in luxury. Resentment had been building for centuries. Suna's propaganda gave that resentment a voice. 3 months passed. The Velkari thought everything was going according to plan. They had taken Earth's colonies and received their tribute. They had humiliated humanity in front of the entire galaxy. They turned their attention to other matters. Then strange things started happening. A military fortress on the border lost power for 6 hours. When it came back online, the computers were acting strangely. Nothing serious, just small glitches. The garrison commander reported it, but his superiors told him to stop worrying about minor technical problems. A supply depot reported missing shipments. The record showed the supplies had been delivered, but the supplies were not there. Someone had changed the database. An investigation found nothing. On 3 different worlds, local governors received anonymous messages about corruption in their administrations. The messages included evidence. Real evidence. The governors had to investigate, and they found that the accusations were true. They arrested their own officials. The incident seemed unconnected. The Velkari did not see a pattern. They had ruled for 3,000 years. They were confident. They were powerful. A few minor problems were nothing to worry about. Back on Earth, Tae-hyun Park sat in his office and studied the reports from his operatives in the field. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Velkari were blind to what was happening. They saw weakness where there was strength. They saw chaos where there was strategy. Mirai Choi joined him. She poured herself a drink and sat down. "Do you think they will figure it out?" she asked. Tae-hyun shook his head. "Not until it is too late. They think they have already won." "That is their biggest mistake," Mirai smiled. "Then let us make sure they keep thinking that." The war had begun. The Velkari just did not know it yet. 6 months after Earth's surrender, the Velkari Dominion was starting to show cracks. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make the High Council worry. Just small problems that kept appearing in different places at different times. Supply shipments arrived late. Communication systems experienced delays. Administrative databases had errors that took days to fix. High Chancellor Velkros barely noticed. His empire had 12,000 systems. Problems were normal. He had more important things to think about. The tribute from Earth had arrived, filling the Dominion treasury. Plans were underway to expand into new territory. Everything was going well. But deep in the Dominion's outer territories, Captain Ji-hoon Kang and his team were everywhere. They had spent 6 months learning the system from the inside. They knew which officials could be bribed. They knew which workers were unhappy. They knew where the security cameras were and where they were not. Ji-hoon stood in a maintenance tunnel beneath a major spaceport. With him were 3 members of his team and a Velkari technician named Borax. Borax was a member of the Thren species, one of the lower castes in the Dominion. The Thren did most of the technical work, but received little respect and less pay. "This is the main data junction," Borax said, pointing to a wall of cables and processors. "Everything in this sector routes through here. Communications, transactions, security feeds, everything." Ji-hoon examined the equipment. It was exactly what Dr. Heejin Lee had described. Velkari technology was sophisticated but predictable. They had been using the same basic systems for centuries. They never expected anyone to attack them from the inside. "Why are you helping us?" One of Jihoon's team members asked Borax. Borax made a sound that might have been a laugh. The Dominion has treated my people like slaves for 800 years. We work, we build. We maintain their entire civilization. And what do we get? Nothing. When you approached me with your offer, I thought you were crazy. But then I thought about my children. I thought about the future. And I realized that crazy might be exactly what we need. Jihoon handed Borax a small device. It looked like a standard maintenance tool, but inside was some of Dr. Heejin Lee's best work. Install this in the primary processor cluster, Jihoon said. It will not do anything obvious. It will just introduce small delays and errors. A message takes 5 seconds longer to send. A transaction gets logged incorrectly. Nothing that will trigger alarms. Death by 1,000 cuts, Borax said. Exactly, Jihoon replied. Over the next 3 months, Borax and hundreds of other recruited Velkari citizens installed similar devices across dozens of systems. Each device was small and subtle. Each one caused minor problems. But together they created chaos. Meanwhile, Ambassador Mirai Choi was fighting a different kind of war. She had spent months studying Velkari society and had identified its weakness. The Dominion was not a unified culture. It was dozens of species held together by military force and economic necessity. The ruling Velkari got the best of everything. Everyone else got what was left. Mirai began making quiet contact with dissidents and reformers. She met with Thren workers who wanted better conditions. She talked to merchants who were tired of excessive taxes. She listened to philosophers who dreamed of equality. She never told them she worked for Earth. She just asked questions and listened. Then she started connecting people. A Thren union organizer met a merchant who could fund their activities. A philosopher met a ship captain who could spread their ideas. Mirai was building a network of resistance, and the Velkari never noticed because she never put herself at the center. She was just a facilitator, helping people find each other. Commander Suna Yoon was also busy. Her propaganda campaign had grown more sophisticated. She no longer spread false information. She did not need to. The Dominion had plenty of real problems, and Suna made sure everyone knew about them. Every corrupt official, every failed policy, every example of inequality. She documented it all and spread it through underground networks. On the economic front, Jiwon Nam was executing her part of the plan. She was a civilian, not a soldier, but her weapon was just as effective. She understood how the Dominion's economy worked, and she knew exactly how to disrupt it. Human corporations began offering better trade deals to Velkari worlds, better prices for raw materials, lower costs for manufactured goods, faster shipping times. The corporations claimed they were just doing business, taking advantage of Earth's defeated status to expand into new markets. The Velkari allowed it because it seemed harmless, but it was not harmless. Every credit that went to human corporations was a credit that did not go to Velkari businesses. Every world that traded with Earth became a little less dependent on the Dominion's central economy. Slowly, the economic center of gravity was shifting. 9 months after Earth's surrender, the problems could no longer be ignored. A Velkari military commander named Threlix sat in his office reviewing reports from across the Empire. He was old by Velkari standards, and he had fought in a dozen wars. He knew what military success looked like. This was not it. Threlix pulled up a map of the Dominion. He marked every location where there had been technical problems, supply disruptions, or civil unrest. The map lit up like a star field. The problems were everywhere, and they were accelerating. He ran a correlation analysis. The computer searched for patterns. What it found made Threlix's blood run cold. Every problem started small and grew slowly. Every disruption appeared unconnected to the others. But when you looked at them together, there was a pattern. Someone was orchestrating this. Someone was sabotaging the Dominion from within. Threlix knew immediately who it was. He pulled up information about Earth's surrender 9 months ago. He read the reports about how quickly and completely humanity had capitulated. It had seemed like a great victory at the time. Now it looked like something else entirely. He sent an urgent message to the High Council requesting an emergency meeting. They made him wait 3 days. When he finally got his meeting, he brought all his evidence and laid it out carefully. The humans never surrendered, Threlix said. They have been at war with us for 9 months. They are inside our systems. They are turning our subjects against us. They are destroying us from within. High Chancellor Velkros looked at the evidence with bored eyes. You see patterns where there is only coincidence, he said. The Dominion is vast. Problems are inevitable. The humans are weak and defeated. This meeting is over. Threlix tried to argue, but the other council members agreed with Velcros. They had ruled for 3,000 years. They had crushed hundreds of rebellions. They were not afraid of a species that had surrendered without firing a shot. That night, Threlix sat in his quarters and made a decision. He had served the Dominion for 60 years. He believed in order and strength. But he also believed in survival. The High Council was blind. They would lead the Dominion to destruction. If they would not listen, then Threlix would have to act on his own. He sent an encrypted message to an address he had found in his investigation. It was a human intelligence contact. The message was simple. We need to talk. 2 days later, Threlix met with Captain Jihoon Kang in a neutral location. Jihoon came alone, as agreed. They sat across from each other in silence for a long moment. I know what you are doing, Threlix said. And yet you are here talking to me instead of sending soldiers to arrest me, Jihoon replied. The High Council will not listen to reason. They think the Dominion is invincible. But I have studied military history. I know that every empire falls eventually, usually because they become arrogant. Threlix leaned forward. I do not want to see my people destroyed because our leaders are fools. So I will help you? Why? Jihoon asked. Why betray your own civilization? Because it is already dead, Threlix said quietly. Your people have won. The Dominion does not know it yet, but the war is over. The only question now is how many lives will be lost before the High Council accepts reality. I am trying to minimize the damage. Jihoon studied the old warrior carefully. He had dealt with many aliens, but few had surprised him like this. Threlix was not acting out of greed or anger. He was acting out of a grim understanding of military reality. What do you want in return? Jihoon asked. Safety for my people. Not the Dominion. Not the High Council. But the ordinary Velcari who have done nothing wrong. They deserve a future. Jihoon extended his hand. I think we can work with that. Threlix took his hand. The Dominion had just lost one of its best commanders, and humanity had gained an invaluable ally. 5 years had passed since the fall of the Velcari Dominion. The Galactic Coalition had grown strong. Trade flourished between member worlds. Former enemies now worked together on joint projects. Peace, real peace, seemed possible for the first time in galactic history. Then the Krishal arrived. Their fleet appeared at the edge of Coalition space without warning. 20,000 warships, each one larger than anything the Coalition possessed. Their technology was beyond anything humanity had encountered. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their shields could withstand any attack. Ambassador Mirai Choi, now chief diplomat of the entire Coalition, received their first message. It was simple and direct. The Krishal hegemony had ruled their part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had been watching the Coalition's formation with interest. Now they had come to absorb it into their empire. Resistance would be futile. Cooperation would be rewarded. The Coalition Council met in emergency session. Representatives from thousands of worlds filled the chamber. Fear was visible on every face. They had just escaped one empire. Now they faced another, far more powerful than the last. Admiral Taehyun Park presented a military analysis. His conclusion was grim. The Coalition could not win a military confrontation. The technology gap was too large. The Krishal had weapons and defenses that humanity could not counter. A war would be a massacre. Some council members wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight despite the odds. Arguments erupted across the chamber. The Coalition, so carefully built, seemed ready to tear itself apart in panic. Mirai stood and waited for silence. When the room finally quieted, she spoke. We have one advantage that the Krishal do not expect. We have experience they lack. They have ruled through force for 10,000 years. They have never needed to cooperate. They have never needed to negotiate as equals. And that is their weakness. How does that help us? A representative demanded. They have 20,000 warships. And we have something they have never seen, Mirai replied. A civilization built on cooperation instead of conquest. We will show them an alternative to empire. And we will let them decide if they want to join us. The council was skeptical, but they had no better options. They authorized Mirai to invite the Krishal to observe the Coalition firsthand. The Krishal sent a delegation. They were tall, silver-skinned beings with multiple arms and eyes that saw into spectrums humans could not perceive. They were ancient, sophisticated, and utterly confident in their superiority. Mirai met them personally and offered them a tour of Coalition space. For 3 months, the Krishal observers traveled to different worlds. They watched former enemies working together on trade agreements. They saw species that had once been slaves now governing themselves. They observed economic prosperity built on mutual benefit rather than extraction. On the agricultural world, they watched Thren farmers selling their crops for fair prices and using the profit to send their children to university. On an industrial world, they saw mixed species work crews collaborating on manufacturing projects. On a research station, they observed scientists from a dozen different civilizations working together to solve problems. Jiwan Nam gave them a presentation on coalition economics. She showed them growth rates, trade volumes, and quality of life improvements. Every metric showed the coalition was thriving. Worlds that had been poor under the Dominion were now prosperous. Innovation was accelerating. Cultural exchange was flourishing. The Krishal delegation leader, whose name roughly translated as first among observers, studied the data with obvious confusion. "This is inefficient," he said. "Your system has too many decision-makers, too many competing interests. It should collapse into chaos." "It would collapse if everyone pursued only their own interest," Jiwan agreed. "But that is not what we do. We pursue mutual benefit. When my neighbor prospers, I prosper. When their children are educated, everyone benefits. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." The Krishal did not seem convinced, but they were clearly thinking about it. They requested more time to observe. Meanwhile, Commander Suna Yoon was running her own operation. She had been studying the Krishal society through every intelligence source available. What she found was fascinating. The Krishal hegemony was powerful, but it was also stagnant. They had achieved technological supremacy and then stopped innovating. They had conquered everything in reach and then stopped expanding. They were an empire frozen in time. More interesting, there were factions within Krishal society. Some wanted to maintain the traditional empire. Others were curious about new possibilities. Suna quietly made contact with the reformist faction, offering them information about how the coalition worked and how it might benefit the Krishal people. After 3 months of observation, the Krishal delegation returned to their home territory. The coalition waited tensely for their decision. Would they attack? Would they negotiate? Would they simply leave? The answer came in an unexpected form. The Krishal fleet approached coalition space again, but this time they sent a different message. They wanted to negotiate membership in the coalition, not as conquerors, not as overlords. As equal partners, the coalition council was stunned. So was Tae-hyun. "They have 20,000 warships," he said to Mirai privately. "They could take everything they want by force. Why would they choose to join us as equals?" "Because force only gives you temporary control," Mirai replied. "Cooperation gives you lasting prosperity. They are 10,000 years old. They have seen empires rise and fall. They know that conquest is a dead end. We showed them a better path." The negotiations took 6 months. The Krishal had concerns about giving up absolute authority. Coalition members had concerns about integrating such a powerful civilization. Compromises were made. Safeguards were established. Trust was built slowly, carefully. Not all Krishal agreed with the decision. Hardliners within their society attempted a military coup, trying to seize control and force the conquest they believed was necessary. But the moderate factions, supported by reformist military units, opposed them. The conflict was brief but decisive. The hardliners lost, voted down by their own people who had seen a better alternative. When the Krishal hegemony officially joined the Galactic Coalition, the celebration lasted for a week. Thousands of worlds marked the occasion. The impossible had happened twice now. First, humanity had transformed the Velkari Dominion. Now they had convinced an even greater empire to choose cooperation over conquest. Dr. Heejin Lee found herself leading a joint research initiative combining human, Velkari, and Krishal technology. The innovations that emerged from that collaboration changed everything. Medical breakthroughs extended lifespans across all species. Energy systems became cleaner and more efficient. Transportation improved. Communication advanced. The coalition entered a golden age of innovation. Captain Ji-hoon Kang retired from active military service. He had fought in 2 wars and prevented a third. Now he trained coalition security forces, teaching them human tactics and strategies. More importantly, he taught them human values: how to win without destroying, how to protect without oppressing, how to use force only when all other options failed. Admiral Tae-hyun Park finally left military service. He had carried the burden of command for too long. He returned to Earth and wrote his memoirs, documenting the war and its aftermath. His book became required reading at military academies across the coalition. Its final chapter was titled, The Strength of Weakness. 10 years after the fall of the Valkyrie Dominion, representatives from 15,000 worlds gathered for the coalition's anniversary celebration. The ceremony took place on Earth in a massive amphitheater built for the occasion. Mirai Choi gave the keynote speech. She was older now, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes, but her voice was as strong as ever. 10 years ago, humanity faced a choice, she said. We could fight an empire we could not defeat. Or we could find another way. We chose the harder path. We chose to transform rather than destroy, to build rather than conquer, to cooperate rather than dominate. And in doing so, we proved that empires do not require emperors. They require trust. They require fairness. They require the courage to see strength in unity rather than hierarchy. She paused and looked out at the assembled representatives. Humans, Valkyrie, Thren, Krishal, hundreds of other species, all working together. The galaxy once claimed that humans had no empire. They were right. We do not have an empire. We have something better. We have a civilization built on choice, not force, on cooperation, not conquest, on hope, not fear. That is humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not domination, but an example of what becomes possible when we work together. The applause lasted for 10 minutes. That evening, Tae-hyun sat on a hillside outside the city and watched the celebration from a distance. He was joined by his old team, Mirai, Ji-hoon, Hye-jin, Suna, Ji-won. They had fought together, planned together, and built a new civilization together. Someone asked Tae-hyun if he ever imagined this outcome when he first read the Valkyrie ultimatum all those years ago. He smiled. No, I thought we would fight a war, win or lose, and that would be the end of it. I never imagined we would change the entire galaxy. We did not change the galaxy, Mirai said. We showed them that change was possible. They did the rest themselves. 1 year after Earth's supposed surrender, the Valkyrie Dominion was collapsing. The outer territories were in open rebellion. Supply chains had broken down completely. Military units were scattered across the empire trying to maintain order, but they were stretched too thin. The economy was failing. Citizens were angry, and High Chancellor Velcros had finally decided to act. He would destroy Earth once and for all. He would show the entire galaxy what happened to species that dared to defy the Dominion. He assembled the largest war fleet in Valkyrie history. 5,000 warships, 10 million soldiers, enough firepower to turn a planet into dust. The fleet departed from the Dominion capital with great ceremony. Citizens lined the streets to watch the ships rise into the sky. Velcros gave a speech promising swift victory and terrible vengeance. The people cheered. They still believed in the Dominion's power. They still thought they were invincible. Admiral Tae-hyun Park watched the fleet's departure from Earth's command center. He had known it was coming. Commander Threlix had provided detailed information about the fleet's composition, route, and timing. Tae-hyun had used that time to prepare. Dr. Hyejin Lee sat beside him, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards. She had spent the last 6 months building a masterpiece of digital warfare. Every device that Ji-hoon's team had installed across the Dominion was now connected in a massive network. Every compromised system, every backdoor, every piece of malicious code, all of it was waiting for her command. The fleet is 3 days from Earth, Tae-hyun said. Are you ready? Hyejin smiled. It was a rare expression for her. I have been ready for 6 months. Just give me the word. Tae-hyun looked at the tactical display. The Valkyrie fleet was massive, but it was also completely dependent on its computer, systems, navigation, weapons, life, support, communications. Everything ran through networks that Hyejin had compromised months ago. Do it, he said. Hyejin pressed a key. Across the Valkyrie fleet, chaos erupted. Navigation systems shut down on 2,000 ships. Weapons malfunctioned on another 1,000. Life support systems began cycling erratically. Communication networks went dark. The fleet that had departed so confidently was suddenly blind, deaf, and helpless. But Hyegen was not finished. She activated her second wave of attacks. This time she targeted the Dominion's infrastructure back home. Power grids failed. Transportation networks stopped. Financial systems crashed. In a matter of hours, the entire Dominion went dark. Meanwhile, Captain Ji-hoon Kang was leading a very different mission. He and Commander Threllick stood in a cargo ship approaching the Dominion capital. With them were 50 of Earth's best special operations soldiers and 300 Velkari, who had defected to the human side. Their target was the Central Control Nexus, the heart of the Dominion's computer network. If they could capture it, they would have administrative access to everything. Every system, every database, every security protocol. The entire empire would be theirs to command. The security around the Nexus is heavy, Threllick said. Even with the chaos from Dr. Lee's attack, we will face significant resistance. Ji-hoon checked his weapons. Then we will have to move fast. Their ship landed at a commercial spaceport near the capital. Security was in chaos. Guards were trying to restore order after the massive system failures. No one paid attention to one more cargo ship among thousands. Ji-hoon's team moved through the city like ghosts. They used service tunnels and maintenance corridors that Threllick had mapped out. They avoided major streets where military units were trying to restore order. Within 2 hours, they reached the Nexus facility. The building was massive, a tower of metal and crystal that reached into the clouds. It was protected by walls, automated defenses, and an elite guard unit. Under normal circumstances, attacking it would be suicide. But these were not normal circumstances. Hyegen had disabled most of the automated defenses. The elite guards were dealing with riots in the streets, and Threllick knew every weakness in the building's security. They entered through a maintenance entrance on the north side. Inside, they found minimal resistance. Most of the staff had evacuated when the systems failed. The few guards they encountered were quickly neutralized. Ji-hoon and his team fought their way to the central control room. It was a vast chamber filled with processors and displays. A handful of technicians were trying desperately to restore functionality. They surrendered without a fight. Ji-hoon opened a communication link to Earth. "Dr. Lee, we have the Nexus. It is yours." Hyegen's voice came through clear and excited. "Beginning remote access now. This is going to take a few hours. Hold your position." Those few hours were tense. Velkari military units realized what was happening and attempted to retake the Nexus. But Ji-hoon's team had chosen their position well. The building's corridors were narrow, forcing the attackers to come at them in small groups. The defectors fought with desperate courage, knowing that failure meant death. Finally, Hyegen's voice came through again. "I am in. I have root access to everything. The Dominion is now running on Earth's operating system." Taehyun took over the communication. "Captain Kang, evacuate immediately. We will handle things from here." Ji-hoon and his team fought their way back to the spaceport and escaped just as Velkari reinforcements arrived. As their ship lifted off, Ji-hoon looked back at the capital. It was burning. Not from Earth's weapons, but from its own internal chaos. High Chancellor Velkros sat in his office and watched his empire die. Reports were coming in from every sector. The fleet sent to destroy Earth was dead in space. The Nexus had fallen. Systems across the Dominion were now responding to commands from Earth. A communication request came through. It was from Admiral Taehyun Park. Velkros almost refused it, but curiosity won out. He accepted. Taehyun's face appeared on the screen. He looked calm, almost sympathetic. "High Chancellor, I am offering you a choice. Surrender now and face trial for your crimes. You will be treated fairly, or refuse and watch your empire tear itself apart in civil war. Many will die, including your own people." Velkros felt rage building inside him. "You think you have won? You think you can rule my empire? You are nothing. You have no legitimacy, no authority. You are chaos pretending to be order." "You are right," Taehyun said quietly. "We are chaos, and that is exactly why we won." Velkros cut the communication. He sat in silence for a long moment. Then he reached for a control panel. Hidden beneath his office was a doomsday weapon, an ancient device capable of destroying entire star systems. If the Dominion was going to fall, then it would take humanity with it. He entered his authorization codes and pressed the activation button. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. A new message appeared on his screen. It was from Commander Suna Yoon. Did you really think we would not find your doomsday weapon? We have been inside your systems for a year. We know everything. It is over. Velcro slumped in his chair. The Dominion had ruled for 3,000 years. Now it was gone, conquered not by a superior military but by a species that fought with information, economics, and patience. Guards entered his office an hour later. They were Velcari soldiers, but they took orders from Earth now. They arrested him without violence. The war was over. Back on Earth, the United Council gathered to face an unexpected problem. They controlled 12,000 star systems. Millions of people depended on them. The infrastructure was in their hands. The economy was theirs to manage. They had won a war they never wanted to fight. Tae-hyun stood before the council. We need to make a decision. What do we do with an empire we never wanted? The room fell silent. They had planned for victory, but they had not planned for this. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. 3 weeks after the fall of the Velcari Dominion, the former empire was in chaos. Worlds that had relied on central authority for everything suddenly had none. Supply chains were broken. Local governments did not know who was in charge. Some places celebrated their freedom. Others descended into violence. Ji-won Nam stood in what used to be the Dominion's Central Economic Planning Office. It was now her responsibility to prevent 12,000 star systems from collapsing into economic disaster. She had 3 assistants, 200 economists on loan from various human colonies, and a problem that seemed impossible to solve. Food shipments to the Relian sector have stopped, one of her assistants said. They are going to run out in 2 weeks. The Relian sector produces nothing but minerals, another assistant added. They traded those minerals for food, but the trading network is down, so they have no way to get supplies. Ji-won pulled up a map of the former Dominion. She identified the nearest agricultural worlds and calculated shipping routes. Send a message to the Terran shipping corporations. Offer them exclusive trading rights in the Relian sector for 5 years if they can get food there within 10 days. Will they do it? Her assistant asked. Ji-won smiled grimly. They will do it for the money. Human corporations are very good at finding profit in chaos. She was right. The food arrived in 8 days. The Relian sector was saved. But there were thousands of similar crises happening all across the former empire. Ji-won worked 20 hours a day every day, putting out fires and rebuilding the economy piece by piece. Ambassador Mirai Choi faced an equally difficult challenge. She had to convince hundreds of planetary governments to accept Earth's authority. Many were willing. They had suffered under Velcari rule and were happy to see it end. But others were suspicious. They thought Earth would be just another oppressive empire. Mirai traveled to dozens of worlds, meeting with local leaders and explaining Earth's vision. She did not promise them wealth or power. She promised them something better, freedom to govern themselves. On a mining world called Thorax Prime, she met with the Planetary Council. They were angry and suspicious. Their people had been slaves under the Dominion. They did not want a new master. Earth does not want to rule you, Mirai said. We want to build a coalition. Each world governs itself. You make your own laws. You choose your own leaders. Earth will provide infrastructure support, trade networks, and military protection. But the decisions are yours. The council leader, a scarred veteran of many rebellions, looked at her with disbelief. Why would you help us? What do you want in return? We want peace, Mirai said. We want trade. We want cooperation. And we want you to help other worlds the same way we help you. That is how the coalition will work. Everyone gives what they can. Everyone receives what they need. The council was silent for a long moment. Then the leader stood and extended his hand. We will try your coalition, but if you betray us, we will fight. Mirai shook his hand. I would expect nothing less. Not everyone was willing to cooperate. Velcari loyalists refused to accept their empire's fall. They formed resistance cells and launched terrorist attacks. They sabotaged infrastructure. They assassinated officials who worked with Earth. They wanted chaos, hoping that chaos would let them restore the old order. Captain Ji-hoon Kang found himself fighting a new kind of war. He led counterinsurgency operations across a dozen worlds, but he refused to use the brutal tactics the Dominion had employed. He would not burn villages or execute prisoners. He wanted to win the war without becoming the monster. On a forest world called Viridian, Jihoon's team tracked a resistance cell to a small settlement. They could have bombed it from orbit. They could have sent in heavy weapons. Instead, Jihoon went in with a small team and no heavy weapons. They found the resistance fighters barricaded in a community center. Civilians were hiding nearby, afraid of the fighting. Jihoon used a loudspeaker to communicate. "We do not want to kill you," he said. "We know you are fighting for what you believe in. But the Dominion is gone. It is not coming back. You can surrender now and be treated fairly, or you can fight and innocent people will die. The choice is yours." The resistance fighters did not believe him at first. They thought it was a trick. But Jihoon waited. He did not attack. He did not threaten. He just waited. After 6 hours, the resistance fighters sent out a representative. Jihoon met with him personally, without weapons, without guards. They talked for 2 hours. In the end, the entire cell surrendered. No one died. Commander Threlix, now working officially with Earth's forces, watched Jihoon's approach with fascination. "You could have destroyed them in minutes," he said. "Why did you wait?" "Because dead enemies stay dead," Jihoon replied. "But people you spare can become allies. We are not here to conquer. We are here to build something better." Threlix nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand why Earth had won. They fought differently because they thought differently. They saw possibilities where others saw only threats. 6 months after the war ended, representatives from 8,000 worlds gathered for a historic summit. The meeting took place on a neutral world, in a massive conference center that had been built in just 3 months. It was the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Mirai Choi stood before the assembly and presented the Treaty of Worlds. It was a document that had taken months to write, with input from hundreds of legal experts and planetary governments. It established the Galactic Coalition as a voluntary federation of independent worlds. Each world would govern itself according to its own laws and customs. The coalition would provide infrastructure, coordinate trade, maintain peace, and protect members from external threats. Decisions affecting multiple worlds would be made by the Coalition Council, with each member world having a vote. Earth would serve as mediator and administrator, but not as ruler.
Humanity had no special privileges.
No veto power, no authority to override local governments. They were members of the coalition, the same as everyone else. The debate lasted for 3 weeks. Every clause was examined. Every word was questioned. Some worlds wanted stronger central authority. Others wanted more autonomy. Compromises were made. Language was adjusted. Finally, the vote was held. 4,000 worlds joined immediately. Another 3,000 said they would observe for a year before deciding. The remaining worlds chose to remain independent, and the coalition respected that choice. That night after the summit ended, Admiral Taehyun Park sat alone in his quarters. He was exhausted. The last year had been the most difficult of his life. He had led a war, helped dismantle an empire, and tried to build something better from the ruins. Mirai found him there, staring out at the stars. She sat down beside him without speaking. They had worked together for so long that words were often unnecessary. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Taehyun asked finally. "I think we did the only thing we could," Mirai replied. "The Dominion was going to fall eventually. At least this way we could guide how it fell. We saved lives. We built something better. That has to count for something." "Millions still died," Taehyun said quietly. "Yes, and we will carry that weight for the rest of our lives." Mirai looked at him. "But empires never fall cleanly. The alternative would have been worse." "Much worse," Taehyun nodded. He knew she was right. But knowing did not make the burden lighter. A message arrived on his personal communicator. It was marked urgent. He read it and felt his blood run cold. "What is it?" Mirai asked. Taehyun showed her the message. It was from a long-range sensor outpost on the galactic rim. They had detected a massive fleet approaching from unexplored space. A fleet that dwarfed anything the Velkari had ever built. "The Krishal hegemony," Mirai read. "They want to negotiate." Taehyun looked out at the stars. Humanity had conquered one empire. Now they would have to face another.